David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We're later going to talk about what might have landed President Trump in the hospital for an unscheduled visit. And we're going to talk about many of the things, in fact, which would likely have caused stress over the weekend, because quite frankly, it was a very stressful couple of days for Donald Trump. During the second day of the impeachment hearings on Friday with Marie Yovanovitch, close Trump advisor Roger Stone and close Trump ally Roger Stone was found guilty on all 7 counts with which he was charged, and Trump absolutely exploded afterwards. Now, as a reminder, please review my interview with Roger Stone from, I guess it must be about a year and a half ago at this point or longer, where Roger Stone insisted he did nothing wrong, no one did anything wrong. And it turns out he may not have been honest with me during that interview. Check that out, because Roger Stone was found guilty on 7 counts, including lying to Congress, witness tampering, obstruction of justice of the Russia probe into Donald Trump. He is Trump aide and advisor number 6 to be convicted so far. So the immediate question is, how much time might Roger Stone end up doing in prison? The answer on paper is that he could end up with up to 20 years. Although if I had to bet, and I am not a betting man, I would bet that Roger Stone gets nothing close to 20 years. And then, of course, we will talk about pardon possibilities momentarily. Adding to the hijinks of the Stone guilty verdict, there's this other Trump aide named Michael Caputo, who was in the courtroom at the time of the verdict's readout, and he had to be removed from the courtroom because when the verdict was read, he just turned around and turned his back on the jury. Extraordinarily childish. But again, these are the types of people that Donald Trump has around him in a variety of different capacities. And then, of course, Trump exploding on Twitter. And why wouldn't he? If Stone were to turn on Trump, it could be very, very bad for the president. Although there's no indication at this point in time that Stone plans to turn on Trump for the purposes of a lighter sentence. And why would he if he expects or anticipates that he will be pardoned by Donald Trump? But we will get to that. Trump first tweeting, but what about all the people that I want put in jail? Saying, quote, so they now convict Roger Stone of lying and want to jail him for many years to come. Well, what about crooked Hillary, Comey, Strzok, Page, McCabe, Brennan, Clapper, Shifty Schiff, Orr, and Nellie, Steele, and all of the others, including even Mueller himself? Didn't they lie a double standard like never seen before in the history of our country? Understand that the president of the United States is publicly saying he wants to put the legally appointed special counsel who investigated him in prison. Trump believes, on the one hand, I guess, that Mueller wrote a report that completely exonerates him. Remember, Trump went around the country claiming that Robert Mueller completely exonerated him. But then he also wants the person who supposedly exonerated him imprisoned. Authoritarian on one hand, but also completely incoherent on the other hand. And then, of course, you're still talking about Hillary, Donald. Seriously. And notably, it's important that Trump doesn't actually say in the tweets, Stone is innocent, Stone is not guilty, Stone might be innocent. He merely says, if you convict Roger Stone for this, then you should really convict all of these other people that I don't like. It's brazen, authoritarian whataboutism. Now, let's discuss the pardon. That's the other topic here that deserves some attention, although it probably deserves its own exploration in a topic in and of itself. As usual, the White House is not even entertaining the idea that Donald Trump may have signaled in any direct or even indirect way that any pardons would be incoming for anybody who keeps their mouth shut. Now, we do have, when it came to Paul Manafort, there were allegations that the possibility of a pardon had been intimated through a number of different channels. I don't have anything specifically about Roger Stone here, but we do know that if you keep your mouth shut and you don't turn on Trump and you don't turn into someone who could potentially put Trump in a precarious position, you may be rewarded with a pardon. When it is all said and done, I hope that Robert Mueller truly, deeply, just sincerely regrets not subpoenaing Donald Trump and at least trying to force him to show up in person, because he didn't do it and Mueller is still getting crushed by Trump. What was the big advantage again to not bringing Trump in? I guess it was that Mueller said, well, the policy of the Justice Department is not to prosecute sitting presidents, so we decided not even to subpoena Donald Trump. Arguably the weakest decision of Mueller's entire investigation, maybe of his entire career, because in the end, he didn't do it. He let Trump off in the weakest possible way. And Trump is still saying publicly, what about imprisoning Robert Mueller? Pardon, we will see. Roger Stone sentencing not scheduled until, I believe it's in the first week of February. And when that time comes, we will see what the guy ends up with. I think it will be far, far short of the 20-year maximum that he could hypothetically be sentenced to. Let me know what you think about the likely sentencing for Roger Stone. Donald Trump's endorsement has failed once again to get a Republican elected in a very red state, because with 51.3% of the vote, incumbent Democratic Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards has been reelected, defeating the Republican challenger Eddie Rispone, or Rispone, I'm not exactly sure how it's pronounced, winning by roughly 40,000 votes, or about 2.5 percentage points. There are many reasons why this is an interesting race. We will talk about a variety of them here. Number one is that, again, this is a red state. This is a red state that will have a Democratic governor now who could, depends what happens in 2020, overlap with a Democratic president, depending on what happens in November, and might actually be able to do some good things and maybe move Louisiana to the left. But we will have to think about whether John Bel Edwards is actually the type of Democrat that wants to move Louisiana to the left, and I'll get to that later. But just as importantly, as we head towards 2020, is the consideration of the Trump effect. This is another Republican in Louisiana whose association with Trump, whose rallying with Trump, whose endorsement from Trump didn't get him the victory, even in a very red state. So we are very quickly learning that red state governors may be worse off with Donald Trump's endorsement, which Eddie Rispone had. So two important things here. Number one, do not let Trump now revise history by pretending that he wasn't heavily promoting the Republican challenger, because Trump went to Louisiana. He rallied for the Republican. Trump was very involved, and Trump just lost on this one. Now, on the other hand, it is really important, and I alluded to this before, to understand that John Bel Edwards, the incumbent, now reelected governor in Louisiana, this is not a progressive Democrat or even anything remotely close to approximating a progressive Democrat. John Bel Edwards is against abortion. John Bel Edwards is for more guns in more places. John Bel Edwards signed a crazy restrictive anti-abortion bill this year in Louisiana. So in a sense, winning by 2.5 percentage points against a candidate that had Trump support is not as notable as it would be if this were an actual progressive, because John Bel Edwards is no progressive. This is about as centrist or even right-wing as a Democrat ever really is. We could, talk about Joe Manchin, who's the Democratic senator from West Virginia, who is the most conservative Democrat in the Senate. Maybe John Bel Edwards is even more to the right of Joe Manchin. You could probably make a strong case of that. We'd have to look issue by issue. But a loss is a loss for Donald Trump. And that's really the issue as we go forward. An endorsement from Donald Trump, support from Donald Trump, Trump rallying with you. It's not enough even to get you a win in many red states. And that could affect not only Donald Trump in 2020, might be a signal about Trump's 2020 reelection attempt, but it could also be interesting in terms of the key Republican senators that we are trying to push out in 2020. A few weeks ago, I told you that although I still think it is unlikely that Democrats take the Senate in 2020, I think it's more likely in 2022. I did revise the strength of that statement. I do believe that there is a path to Democrats taking the Senate in 2020. And one of the things that would very much help Democrats take the Senate in 2020 is if Donald Trump's support becomes increasingly toxic. And we'll continue to follow that. The other funny thing about this is how Republicans have just wound themselves into a knot around this Louisiana gubernatorial race. They were confident going in because, like I said, Louisiana is very red. And before the election, many of these Trumpists were saying, this is going to show you the power of Trump. This win, this removal of the incumbent Democratic governor by Eddie Rispone, I wish I knew how to pronounce it, is going to show you how Donald Trump is very, very strong. His endorsement, his support, they're going to knock out the incumbent Democratic governor. They lost. And now that they lost, they are pretending Trump was never really that involved. And anyway, this guy was a bad candidate. It's not Trump's fault. This has nothing to do with Trump whatsoever. Trump flew there and held his crazy nationalist rallies, mostly, of course, to feed his own ego. I don't know that it was really to take out the Democratic governor. It was probably because Trump wanted to get in front of a crowd that was once again handpicked brown nosers, because it ended very poorly for him when he went to the World Series game, when he went to the UFC match. He wanted one of these crazy, sycophantic crowds, but it did not ultimately help the Republican win. So that's going to be a super interesting narrative to follow into the 2020 elections, and we will be following it for sure. Let me know what you think about this. Reply on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, send me a tweet at D Pakman. If you are on Twitter, I will remind you on Black Friday, I think, or Thanksgiving Day, we are going to be sending out an email with the last major membership drive of 2019. If you've been thinking about becoming a member and supporting the show, but you want to do it at a massive discount, get on our newsletter by going to davidpakman.com. Many hundreds of you have done this since I mentioned it last week. Sign up, and then on Thanksgiving Day or Black Friday, you will get an email which will say, this is the coupon code you were waiting for. It will be a beautiful, glorious thing. That I can assure you. Get on the newsletter. We will take a quick break and be back right after this. A very, very busy news weekend.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new members of the day are Margaret Cull and Stefan Quaidvlig. I hope I'm pronouncing Quaidvlig correctly. Margaret and Stefan, thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. I also want to say thanks to today's longtime sustaining member of the day, Carol Ryan. Carol has been a David Pakman Show member for almost 5 years. Thanks to all of you, and thanks for your role in helping us get to 750,000 YouTube subscribers, which we did in the last 24 hours. And I will talk a little bit more about that later on in the program. In the meantime, you can become a member in under a minute at joinpakman.com. I must have gotten 3 or 4 dozen emails over the weekend about Donald Trump going to the hospital for a multi-hour unplanned visit. It wasn't on his schedule, with speculation just running rampant about what this is related to. And some of the people who emailed me about this were speculating that maybe this is related to Trump's cognitive decline. But you don't get rushed to a hospital unexpectedly for cognitive decline. You schedule a meeting with a neurologist and you get tested. So I don't believe that that's what this is about. Now, the White House in retrospect is saying that these were tests related to Trump's 2020 annual physical. But it really doesn't make sense because, again, it wasn't on Trump's schedule and the hospital didn't know Trump was coming. And I'll get to that later. What is very clear is that the White House doesn't seem to be telling the truth about this. The more they speak, the more it sounds odd, because Trump's press secretary said Trump is, quote, anticipating a very busy 2020, and therefore wanted to take advantage of a, quote, free weekend in Washington to just get ahead on some portions of his routine checkup not scheduled until next year. Doesn't really make much sense, and I'll tell you why in a second. Donald Trump also tweeting, quote, visited a great family of a young man under major surgery at the amazing Walter Reed Medical Center. Those are truly some of the best doctors in the world. Also began phase 1 of my yearly physical. Everything good. Great, actually. Will complete next year. Now, why would we doubt this? There are many reasons. First, showing up unexpectedly in November of 2019 for parts of a physical not scheduled until 2020, when Trump's past physicals have just lasted 4 hours and he was there for 2 hours this time, it just doesn't really make any sense. And then you add to this that Trump just had a physical 9 months ago. It also doesn't make sense that he would be rushing in months early to get another physical, or at least part of one, done. Add to this that Walter Reed Hospital says, we didn't know Trump was coming. He was not scheduled to be here. If you're coming in for 2 hours of tests and you're the president, you can be damn sure that the hospital knows that you're coming. Karen Tumulty has a good piece in the Washington Post, which should guide us, which explains that even when the White House's explanations make sense or appear to make sense, they are very often lies. They lie all the time. They lie about everything, even insignificant things. When the White House's explanation does not make sense, you can be almost certain that it's a lie. And here, the explanation makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And in fact, claims around Donald Trump's health haven't made sense for a very long time. Remember, claiming that he is 6'3" when Obama is 6'1", and in any picture of them together, Trump is clearly shorter than Barack Obama. That never made sense, but it was useful to try to have numbers on paper that make Trump just short of obese rather than obese. The letter from Trump's old doctor, Harold Bornstein, that Trump would be the healthiest president ever when he was at the time, I believe 70 or 71, eats food constantly, arguably obese, if not borderline obese. And Bornstein, of course, hadn't examined any other presidents. How could Harold Bornstein say Trump would be the healthiest president ever? It didn't make sense. You would have to be very dim to believe that Donald Trump, not scheduled for medical exams until next year, would say, hey, you know what? I'm not golfing this weekend. What the hell? Let's go do 2 hours of testing at Walter Reed, even though they have no idea that I'm coming. There is no chance that that's the real explanation. Now, my mere speculation is that Trump went in for something like chest pain or something along those lines, possibly a panic attack. This is the type of thing where someone feels as though they can't breathe and their chest hurts. They go in, they have a workup done. Doctors check to see if you've had a heart attack. And very often they come out and say, you didn't have a heart attack. It seems that this was a panic attack. Trump is not a healthy guy. He doesn't exercise. He's overweight nearly to the point of obesity or obesity, depending on what numbers you believe. He eats terribly. He's 73 years old. At some point, one would imagine that that would have repercussions. If I had to bet, I would say panic or anxiety related chest pain. I don't blame the guy. Things are not going well. The wall's closing in. Roger Stone indicted on 7 counts. Impeachment inquiry. Another loss in Louisiana, things not looking good for Trump. That is my best guess, and it is merely a guess. Last thought. If Trump does abuse uppers, amphetamines, as it increasingly seems that he does, and we're going to talk about that momentarily, those can make someone feel like they are having a heart attack. And it wouldn't be remotely surprising if it was related, if indeed that is what Donald Trump is doing. Of course, Trump not seen publicly or by the White House press corps, other than when he left the hospital, as of this recording of the segment, up until now, tweeting, certainly tweeting nonstop, but also not seen publicly in any kind of capacity. We will see if we ever learn the truth with the Trump administration. Very often, we never do. Okay, so many of you are aware that it is not just cognitive decline that is a possibility to explain Donald Trump's bizarre behavior. But increasingly, the explanation we are seeing get more and more traction is amphetamine use, or better said, abuse. We've seen Trump's upper and downer modes, 2 very different Trumps depending on what's going on. And we don't know exactly what's going on. Sometimes high energy, sweaty, red, agitated, speaking quickly, corresponding with the upper phase. And then the slow, slurring, depressed Trump, who often has trouble making sense of the speech that's on his prompter or on paper in front of him, which corresponds with more of a coming down from uppers phase. We've also seen pictures of Donald Trump's Trump Tower desk stuffed with boxes of Sudafed, and specifically a version of Sudafed that's not sold in the United States, and it is more Sudafed than one person can even legally buy at a time in the United States. Now, Sudafed can be crushed up and snorted like Adderall can. It can be taken by mouth. Publicly, Trump often shows signs and symptoms of amphetamine abuse. Some examples include sounding stuffed up whenever he's in downer mode. Has Donald Trump had a cold for the last 3 years? I guess it's possible, but it is common that Sudafed, for example, is a nasal decongestant. It can cause a rebound congestion effect where it wears off, especially when you're taking recreational amounts, as we see that Donald Trump does this often and constantly sounds stuffed up. Trump, in fact, sounded stuffed up during the press conference with Turkish President Erdogan last week, and I'm going to get to that momentarily. Another effect of that rebound congestion after you start coming down from the uppers is that you sniff a lot, which Donald Trump does all the time. As you may have seen compilation videos of Trump speaking and sniffing between phrases, as I am sort of demonstrating for you right now. Trump also appearing to have trouble speaking when in downer mode. Sometimes it seems as though his dentures are loose. But remember, based on his medical exam, Trump doesn't wear dentures. Rich guys tend not to wear dentures, but to get dental implants. So that's not an explanation. It just so happens, though, that dry mouth is a symptom of amphetamine abuse, be it Adderall or Sudafed. This is what it sounds like when Trump is in that mode.
Let us rethink old assumptions and open our hearts and minds to possible and possibilities. And finally, I ask the leaders of the region, political and religious, Israeli and Palestinian, Jewish and Christian and Muslim, to join us in the noble quest for lasting peace. Thank you. God bless you. God bless Israel. God bless the Palestinians, and God bless the United States. Thank you very much.
There it is. And again, if you don't believe Trump wears dentures, which we've been told he doesn't, and rich people tend not to wear them, dry mouth makes a lot more sense. And it just so happens that it's another symptom of amphetamine abuse. So that's all the stuff we knew. The new thing is that I was contacted by an anesthesiologist over the weekend who said, David, I was looking at pictures and video of Donald Trump at last week's press conference with the Turkish President Erdogan. There were bright lights on them. It was a very brightly lit room. And in a normal situation, pupils would be relatively contracted during that situation. But Donald Trump has extremely dilated pupils when you look closely at him from this press conference. Now, of course, in a bright room, pupils should contract if something is not keeping them dilated. As we know, stimulants increase the concentration of norepinephrine in the brain, which keeps the pupils stuck in that open position. An anesthesiologist looked at this and wrote to me, when I see this, I see someone who is clearly on some kind of stimulant. Now, you also saw Trump blinking a lot and squinting, which would be exactly what you do if you're in a bright room and your pupils aren't contracting. When you go to the eye doctor, as I recently did, and you get the drops to dilate your pupils so that the doctor can look in at the back of the eye, when you get out and go outside, if you're not wearing very dark sunglasses, it is extremely uncomfortable. So do we know for sure? We don't, but it's all shaping up pretty clearly. I want to hear from you. The slurred speech, dry mouth, dilated pupils, upper downer Trump, sniffing and congestion, another known rebound effect of using too much nasal decongestant. Let me know what you think. I want to hear from you. Send me a tweet on Twitter at @DPakman. Leave a reply to the YouTube clip or the Facebook video clip. Wherever you are watching, I want to hear from you. What do you think is going on?
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
This is one of the funniest clips I maybe have ever seen on news media. Fox News has really been grasping at straws over the Trump impeachment hearings, but this is maybe a straw too far, no pun intended, because it does relate to water. So George Kent was one of the first two Trump impeachment hearing witnesses. We had last Wednesday, George Kent and William Taylor. On Friday, we had Marie Yovanovitch. George Kent, being a member of Homo sapiens, has a physical body which must consume and process water throughout the day. And the impeachment hearings were 6 hours long, and George Kent drank and processed water during the impeachment hearings. Now that's it. If you're waiting for some punchline, there is none. Fox criticized Kent for drinking what some clown on the Laura Ingraham show called, this is my favorite new phrase, a medical amount of water, which is maybe the funniest thing I've ever heard as a term for just drinking water, consuming a medical amount of water. Take a look at this.
He drank a lot of water, Laura. I mean, fish are not this hydrated. Look, he's always taking slow. Look, throughout the hearing, took slugs from
What is this?
thing.
Is he on the treadmill?
I don't know.
This with a water bottle? Do you guys see that?
It's amazing. It was like a medical-sized water tower.
I thought he had an oxygen chamber.
A water silo.
A medical amount of water. What does that mean? He also breathed a medical amount of air during the hearing. He synthesized vocal cord contractions into speech. How dare he? Now, I have to admit, I didn't notice this, and I watched the entire hearings because I was focused on what Kent was saying, and clearly that was not an advantageous focus to reinforce the Fox News narrative. So Laura Ingraham instead talked about his water drinking. 6 hours of talking. Makes sense. You would need water, right? No, he was taking slugs of medical amounts of water. These people are truly pathetic. Can you imagine being so lacking in cognitive function that you think Fox News counts as a news channel of some kind? The president is under impeachment inquiry hearings. He's panicking on Twitter, dozens of tweets as these things are going on, attempts to assassinate the character of the witnesses, failing miserably. And they're talking about a guy being well hydrated during a 6-hour hearing. I was reviewing different commentaries from the hearings, and the Trump defenders used such terms as embarrassing theatrics to describe the hearings. Somehow, I think that embarrassing theatrics is maybe a phrase better suited to a segment criticizing a witness for drinking water. This is all they have. Now, I'm going to play a clip for you in a second of Laura Ingraham saying, losers are criticizing us for saying this. If they had more, they'd have focused on it. They could. This is another version of Watergate, right? The Laura Ingraham show, then whining about this being discussed.
Reaction to Raymond Arroyo and myself joking about State Department official George Kent's huge water bottle at yesterday's hearing. All right, we were joking about it last night. Look at these headlines. They devoted headlines to our joke. Okay, Fox News, stunned that impeachment witness drank water. Fish are not this hydrated. That was a funny line. Well, so they all talked to this on Twitter, including Conway. George Conway, by the way, he gave a glancing blow to it. But we found it very interesting because not long ago, a lot of these same characters thought the Republicans' Watergate was actually pretty darn hilarious.
Hilariously enough, the Republican water incidents have actually been very strange. George Kent just drank water. That's not weird. Republican Senator Marco Rubio, for example, seemingly desperate to quench a parched throat during a very brief speech, no 6-hour marathon like this was. Or Donald Trump, another example, visibly struggling with his small hands to drink water, having to put both hands, sorry, I punched my mic, both hands around the glass to hold it correctly. Anyway, a medical amount of water. This is my new favorite phrase, and clearly very, very high level ideas and indictments of the witnesses happening over on Fox News, particularly on the Laura Ingraham show, which, we've been wondering what is going to happen on Fox News. Is there going to be this split? We have seen Judge Andrew Napolitano continue to make the rounds on Fox and Friends and other shows saying this doesn't look good for Trump. The facts don't support Trump's narrative. This is potentially criminal, so on and so forth. But on the opinion shows, Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity for sure. I have not seen Jeanine Pirro's commentary over the weekend, but my guess is it's probably relatively brown-nosing. They are very clear. They're with Trump. They're with Trump for sure. The witnesses aren't credible. It's all a witch hunt. It's all terrible. And resorting to phrases like a medical amount of water to try to ridicule the witnesses. I told you last week that within minutes of finishing my live stream of the first day of Trump impeachment hearings, CNN filed a copyright claim on my 6-hour live stream, which I spent all day producing, instantly taking the video offline, instantly cutting off views, instantly cutting off revenue to that video. Now, I reached out to CNN and I appealed the claim and I said, hey, we didn't use one damn second of CNN video. Please release the claim. And by the following morning, the claim had been released. Despite being completely bogus, we did lose views and monetization for many, many hours during a key time that people were interested in that video. Sad, but we moved on. Friday, I did another 6-hour live stream. And in addition to that day's broadcast, we did audience questions on the stream, the full hearing, so on and so forth. And it happened again. But this time it's even worse. This time it wasn't just CNN that claimed revenue and blocked the video. So did NBC News. Now, as a reminder, we did commentary on the hearings using a C-SPAN feed of the impeachment hearings. House of Representatives proceedings are funded by my tax dollars and your tax dollars, and C-SPAN's broadcasts of House proceedings are in the public domain. We did not use a single second of NBC coverage nor CNN coverage, and yet I get an email from YouTube saying the David Pakman Show impeachment hearing day 2 has received a claim from NBC News. This instantly became indistinguishable from parody, and we instantly lose the revenue from the video we spent all day producing. Now, of course, I immediately appeal. I email my YouTube rep. I email anyone I know. And within a few hours, NBC releases the claim. Thank you so much. We can now monetize the video again. And within, it must have been no more than 5 minutes of NBC releasing the claim, I start getting emails from viewers saying, David, your entire video of that stream and your commentary has been blocked by CNN on copyright grounds. This now has to be a parody, right? This can't be real. I'm sure someone just made a Photoshop that makes it look like the video was taken down, but oh, I check my email, and yes, the David Pakman Show impeachment day 2 has now received a claim from CNN. What? And I check, and this time, unlike with NBC, where we merely lost monetization, CNN has blocked the entire video. So once again, I appeal. I start emailing everyone I know, and eventually it was unblocked. This is not how this is supposed to work. Now, this time, fortunately, this is actually getting attention. Reclaim the Net published an article called David Pakman Hit with NBC News Content ID Claim on YouTube video containing none of their footage, where, good for them, Reclaim the Net actually wrote about what's going on, where they say, quote, YouTube's broken copyright system is at it again. Political commentator David Pakman's coverage of today's impeachment hearing against President Trump was hit with a Content ID claim from NBC News, despite the video containing none of their footage. Now, this is where it starts to get interesting. This article in Reclaim the Net led to some lawyers reaching out to me. And of course, as much as they want to help, this is not easy to fight because this is how the system is supposed to work. This is an automatic Content ID system that works for big media against shows like mine and so many others that you probably watch. It gives the benefit of the doubt to the computerized algorithm that supports CNN and NBC and others, and it makes me, the little guy, have to prove that I didn't break the rules. So again, we're talking to lawyers. I'm seeing if we can fight this in any more systematic way. But in the meantime, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. Keep signing up on our website for memberships to make that YouTube revenue as irrelevant as we can. 175 people, thank you, signed up for memberships since we got hit last week, and I so appreciate you doing that. Let's keep it going. davidpakman.com/membership. Memberships are really cheap. I won't spend a lot of time on this. They really help us. Even if you contribute $3 a month by using the coupon code HALF19, which saves you 50%, that $3 a month is way, way, way more than we make from any one viewer on YouTube. That I can assure you. Any one viewer, we make fractions of a cent from on YouTube. So you are doing so much good. Please keep doing it. I'll keep you posted about anything legal that we can do or that we choose to do. But it is very, very ugly. And it is unfortunately, listen, all I can do is we've got to do the streams that our audience wants us to do. These impeachment hearing streams have gotten 6,000 to 7,000 live concurrent viewers for a 6-hour period. That is a really successful stream for us. It is highly engaging. We get subscribers, we get members and super chat questions. We're going to keep doing it. And then if we have to fight for the revenue once those videos are archived, I'm ready to do it. It sounds like we have people who are willing to help us do it. And we're going to try to fix the system if we can. But if we can't, we will work within it and do everything that we can to keep doing this content and to keep providing the commentary. So that's where we are today. Sadly, I know it seems satirical. We had this happen on Wednesday, and then it happens doubly on Friday. But it is what it is. I'll keep you informed about how it continues.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I have an interesting clip to play for you from Eric Weinstein's podcast, The Portal, which I actually listened to. It's quite an interesting podcast where my name came up in a discussion with Sam Harris. Now, I want to be really clear, especially because Eric and Sam might see this YouTube clip. The YouTube clip title is sort of a joke. My YouTube titles are often sort of jokes. We play around satirically with the ways that it's become sort of en vogue to title YouTube clips. This person was destroyed, that person was attacked, whatever. It's just a joke. So please, the YouTube titles are meant to be interesting, but the important thing is the discussion. It was reported to me over the weekend that Eric Weinstein attacked me and that Sam Harris defended me on Eric's podcast. Now, this was actually an interesting discussion about tactics versus substance. I think I'm being accurate when I say that Eric Weinstein and Sam Harris agree with much of the substance of the left's positions, but seriously question many of its tactics. And I've spoken with Sam Harris about this when he was on the program. So a few names came up during this discussion. Sam Seder's name came up and others. I don't remember who else. And when my name comes up, Sam Harris says, David Pakman, I have seen act in good faith. And Eric Weinstein says, well, not always. Let's take a listen to a couple of minutes from Eric's show.
Well, that's ridicule, but you're ridiculing something that you strawmanned and didn't understand. Right. Because the person actually was making sense. And so what I see is that the left, and in particular the Sam Seder crowd, has a...
Doing that with abandon.
Well, it's willing to do two separate things. Sam is quite willing, like there's this whole thing about, will you talk to Sam Seder? Will you debate Sam Seder? And my feeling is I would debate part of Sam Seder, the part that just is focused on the ideas, but the part that is kind of like nasty and ridiculing and doing the Alinsky thing, I don't know what to do with it. I'm not interested. I've spoken to Sam Seder on the phone. It's perfectly reasonable, made sense to me. We disagreed on positions, but...
Well, the line that gets crossed for me always with these guys, and again, it's disproportionately on the left, is the line of conscious dishonesty. I mean, it's your brother's aphorism, bad faith changes everything.
Bad faith changes everything.
And I mean, these guys are in bad faith. They know they're lying about, in my case, my views, my actual beliefs. And
not all of them.
There's just too much information.
Well, David Pakman...
No, David Pakman's fine. I just did his podcast.
Yeah, I know. But David Pakman said some pretty non-charitable things in some parts that seemed kind of ridiculing. And
of me?
I think you, me, other people.
Well, I have never seen him misrepresenting my views. And I think that, I mean, I don't know him. I just did his podcast once, but he seems like somebody who, if I said, listen, you got me wrong here, that would matter, and he would make an effort to get me right.
And that's the thing, which is the problem that we have increasingly is that the tactics that are being used in what are called progressive circles have been confused with the content. So that is the objection to the vehicle, which might be Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals, is conflated with the
totally
payload.
Unethical program for smearing people dishonestly.
Well, being non-charitable, I actually don't think is objectively a problem. I start from a position of charity, and I think we all should when we analyze or critique something. But if we find a reason why someone maybe doesn't deserve our fullest charity, we can retract that charity in good faith. That can still be a good faith action. We don't have to endlessly steelman every false notion that we hear come out of anybody's mouth once we have a better systemic or holistic assessment of their character and whether they act in good faith or bad faith. But that's not really the issue here. Now, Sam Harris asks whether I said things ridiculing him. And of course, the answer is no. What Eric Weinstein is referring to is a clip where I talked generally about the intellectual dark web. And I said, you know, it is not as intellectual as they may want you to think. And I got dozens of emails from people saying, David, are you saying Sam Harris isn't an intellectual? Each time I would answer calmly and clearly, I'm not saying that Sam Harris isn't an intellectual. What I am saying is that there is less intellectualism in the intellectual dark web than they as a loosely organized group might want you to think. And that doesn't just refer to the stars of the IDW, but it also refers to a lot of the followers as well. Now, here's an example, just to be thorough, of when someone would ask me, very concerned, David, were you talking about Sam Harris not being an intellectual? Here's just one example of that coming up and me responding.
Hey, David. I just listened to your take on the pseudo-intellectualism, and I agree with most of those folks that were named in that article, but Sam Harris, really? I don't understand how he's a pseudo-intellectual. Is it because he offends numerous people when he claims that the ideas of Christianity and Islam are completely foolish and stupid? That's the only thing I could think of. Other than that, I'm lost. Help me out, David. I'll talk to you later.
So listen, I mentioned Sam Harris once in yesterday's story, merely in that he was mentioned in a New York Times article called The Intellectual Dark Web by Barry Weiss. I mentioned Sam Harris's name and a number of other names only insofar as I was telling you about the article that sort of got me thinking about the story I did yesterday. I never said yesterday that Sam Harris is not an intellectual. I've read a lot of Sam Harris's work. I have some political disagreements with Sam Harris. I think that his book, The Moral Landscape, is endlessly fascinating. I've never really taken a position on whether Sam Harris is or isn't an intellectual. I believe that he is, and that's okay to say that and still say that I disagree with some of the stuff that he said. My commentary yesterday was not about saying Sam Harris is not an intellectual. And if that's mostly what you focused on, you really missed the point of my entire commentary. Okay, so no, I never said Sam Harris isn't an intellectual. I mentioned his name yesterday in passing as one of many 5, 6, 7 different people that were mentioned by Barry Weiss. I think Steven Pinker was mentioned. I'm not saying Steven Pinker is not an intellectual. The commentary was about the environment in which pseudo-intellectualism and faux intellectualism is sort of welcomed and embraced by people, rather than about saying who is or isn't on the list of intellectuals. Now, it is true that, for example, Dave Rubin is not an intellectual. You can agree or disagree with the sort of libertarian small government talking points that Dave Rubin has adopted over the last couple of years. But Dave Rubin is not an intellectual, and I think that that is a perfectly reasonable thing to say. It's not an attack on anybody. It's just, I don't even think Dave Rubin would say, although I don't know, that he is an intellectual. What Eric is referring to, and I've spoken to Eric personally about this, is that my comments at the time were probably general enough that somebody who doesn't know me, and Eric didn't know me at the time, and I didn't know Eric at the time, someone could interpret what I was saying to mean that there are no intellectuals in the intellectual dark web. That is, of course, now very clearly not what I meant. But much of the story was actually about the pseudo-intellectualism in the audiences of the IDW movement, to the extent that those exist, not about the members themselves. This is a totally different conversation. Now, at the same time, this is a critique I've made about people who read Bill O'Reilly's pop history books and read nothing else and think they are now informed historians because they read Bill O'Reilly's take on Abraham Lincoln or whatever. It is a different story, and it is a story about the ways in which the messages from, doesn't matter who it is, and I'm not equating Sam Harris to Bill O'Reilly, believe me. It is a story about the followers, which is a very interesting one, actually, that I think deserves a lot of examination. So the fair critique of me, based on what Eric is saying, is David Pakman wasn't clear or precise enough when I made my initial commentary about the intellectual dark web. These commentaries, by the way, at this point, are roughly 2 years old. I looked for my IDW critiques that Eric was referring to, and I found a clip from May of 2018, which maybe is the one. Maybe they're even older. I don't know. So I know what Eric is referring to. Eric and I have had nice conversations. We've been talking about maybe getting him on the David Pakman show, me being on his show if I'm in LA at some point. I have proposed some dates to Eric for being on with me. I have not heard back, but it's still something I'm interested in. I think most of my audience knows that even if you disagree with me on my conclusions, I am a good faith actor who simply calls things like I see them, and I am not deliberately dishonest. So I'm fine with this discussion that took place, and I think everybody was reasonably respectful, although I simply disagree with the characterization of what Eric said about my previous comments. I really need to say a major and huge thank you to our YouTube subscribers who now number more than 750,000. This happened yesterday, so we're just past that number, 750,000 now. I'm just flattered and so inspired. When we first started this channel, I think in the first month, we had 4 subscribers. Maybe it was 10. I struggle to remember. We now are gaining several hundred subscribers every single day. And it's extremely exciting as we now get into an election year, which is often when growth accelerates. And we are really positioned to get to the next level. I mean, in the YouTube left, thanks to your support, and I'm talking about the trolls as well. I'm thanking the trolls as well, and I'll detail that in a second. You've got the Young Turks with 4.5 million subscribers. And then you have the David Pakman Show, Kyle Kulinski, and Sam Seder, all in the 700 to 800,000 subscriber range. So this is a great place to be. It's great company to share. And now let me get to the trolls and the haters. I have to thank them as well. The trolls and the haters who make it a point to dislike my videos and leave a whole bunch of hate comments on them. You were actually a huge part of the success as well. Individually, the trolls are really annoying. In total, the trolls represent a portion of the engagement on the channel that has helped us grow. Dislikes count as engagement. You see a video and you were motivated to dislike it. That means you're engaging with the content. Negative, angry comments, while many of the comments are vile in their content, they are engagement. And they say to the YouTube algorithm, wow, the content here is getting people to take action. The frequency with which someone is liking or disliking or leaving a comment, that is a huge piece of the YouTube algorithm learning whose videos are likely to generate a reaction and discussion and keep people watching. So genuinely, thank you, not only to the supporters, but to the trolls as well. All those comments saying, David, your show and your channel are dying. Your show is circling the drain. By leaving me those comments and by disliking my videos, you're helping to ensure that it's not the case and that the show keeps growing. So extraordinarily exciting year coming up is my prediction. As of right now, we are sort of projected based on current subscriber growth rates to be close to 1 million subscribers around election 2020. Now, my hope is that as we really get into the 2020 election, primaries, Trump unhinged, all of that stuff, I hope that our growth rate will accelerate slightly and push the 1 million subscriber milestone to before the 2020 election. It would be amazing. It is a stretch goal, but it would be amazing for us to be a 1 million plus subscriber YouTube channel by the time that we get to the 2020 election. And, you know, in the end, the truth is really what matters is views, because you don't have to be subscribed to view the content. Some people often tell me, you know, Dave Rubin's YouTube channel is so much more successful than yours. He's got 1 million subscribers. We have roughly double the views of Dave Rubin's channel. And that is really the most important thing. But there's no question that subscribers are sort of a very front and center barometer for how a channel is doing. So we're going to continue doing our thing. 750 feels like a great number to be at this point in time. I look forward to continuing on in 2020 with more content, more long form pieces, more daily political news, interviews, and everything else that's been working for us so far. Opportunities for you to help. Do you want to be a moderator of our YouTube live streams? We do need help with that because they are getting so big and out of control that our current moderators are overwhelmed. Get in touch via email through the contact form on my website if you want to be a YouTube moderator. Send a link to your YouTube profile. Do you want to be a moderator on our subreddit? The subreddit is now one of the largest subreddits based around a single show on the progressive left. We need more moderators. We only have, I think, 4. And we have nearly 16,000 subscribers on the subreddit. That is a volunteer opportunity. As always, if you want to contribute graphics, memes, funny things we can use on social media or whatever the case may be, it is an open door and so much great stuff has come from the audience. So many opportunities. And if nothing else, click the subscribe button right now. If you're watching this and you are not one of our 750,000 subscribers, add your name to the list. Click that subscribe button. We have a voicemail number. That number is 2192-DAVID-P. This is something a lot of people contacted me about. What exactly is wrong with Congressman Jim Jordan? Take a look at this.
Hi, David. How's it going? Michael from Missouri. I just got done watching these impeachment inquiry videos, and what is wrong with the Gymnasium Jordan?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, what's wrong with that guy? I think that someone needs to get him, I don't know, maybe a medical amount of water or something like that. So the man seriously needs some help. Thank you.
He is unhinged, and it's interesting. So first of all, if you don't understand the reference to Gymnasium Jordan, I'm not going to mention it here because I'd rather this video not get demonetized. And much like when you talk about a certain person who was found dead under suspicious circumstances in the last few months, your video is demonetized. If I told the Gymnasium Jordan story, the video would also be demonetized. So look up the gymnasium thing. Yeah, I see Jim Jordan as an unhinged player on the Republican side who believes himself to be, and it has tricked a lot of people, an incisive and devastating questioner of the left, of witnesses who are critical of Donald Trump. And his behavior is not just bizarre, it's downright wacky. And you can see this in any number of recent hearings. His physical appearance contributes to that. And I don't know if it should or should not be considered, but his physical demeanor and appearance also just makes him seem completely out of control. Fortunately, he has a cult following on the right, but he's not really making much of an impact. His attempts recently, at least in the impeachment hearings, to try to derail the testimony have fortunately not worked. So continue keeping an eye on him, including this week during the impeachment hearings. Remember, on Black Friday, we will be sending out an email to everybody on our newsletter with a massive David Pakman Show membership special. This is the last membership drive of the year. If you've been thinking of becoming a member, but you are waiting for a sweet discount, get on our newsletter by signing up at davidpakman.com. And then on Black Friday, next Friday, you will be emailed with a super secret one-time use coupon code that you can use to get a massive, bigly tremendous discount off of membership. We have a great bonus show for you today. We will talk, by the way, about a prison worker related to that person who died connected to Trump suspiciously a few months ago. We will talk about that. We will talk about Trump pardoning 2 service members accused of war crimes. And we will also talk about a very strange situation involving White Castle and the suspension of 3 judges. All of those stories and a possible upcoming chess battle at the David Pakman Show. On today's bonus show, become a member or a patron to get instant access.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.